coming in for Dallas short-handed, and Kochetkov gets run into and makes the save. And now Robinson will keep in. Bouncing puck. Necas tries to roll one towards Ottinger. He'll get it back across the rink. Good chance for Kotkaniemi, scores! And now Carolina finds themselves tied. Now here's Walker working his way in. Shot up Ottinger, they score! And this is going to be Walker's goal. I believe it goes in off of the Stars player. No, give it to Jesperi, Kotkaniemi. Robertson, long stretch pass to on one across. Diving play by Burns, rebound chance, and Kochetkov gets a piece. Oh, Carolina now loose with the puck. Slavin goes to one knee to try to make a...
Welcome to the Canes Corner podcast. We'll just stop that right there. Hi, everyone. I am Adam Gold. Thank you very much for the time as the Canes Corner podcast is back. I apologize for the two games that I missed, but life intervenes. And if I'm A, not able to watch the game as I was on Friday, or B, not in a position where I can record or go live on a podcast, which was the case yesterday, I can't do it. But I do appreciate we'll just call it interest from Hurricanes fans on my Twitter timeline or my Blue Sky timeline. I have discovered less sarcasm. Just use sarcasm on Blue Sky than Twitter. All right, so we're brought to you by the Aluminum Company of North Carolina. If it is for the exterior of your home, you can find it at the Aluminum Company of North Carolina on Hamlin Road in in Durham. Not in Raleigh, in Durham. No place like it, but I mean, it's a 919 area code. What's the big deal? Wow, good win for the Carolina Hurricanes, and I've got 4 things I want to get to tonight. Maybe a 5th because we'll throw in some standings news because I think the standings are important. And by the way, Wake Forest held on to beat Carolina 67-66. Tar Heels a bit on the struggle bus. Maybe, just maybe, Wake Forest is good. Don't know. All right, so, 5 things I want to discuss. We'll talk about goaltending. We're going to talk about the blue line. Specifically one member of the blue line who I thought stood out tonight. We're going to talk about Carolina's best line tonight, specifically to one member of it, but we'll get all 3. And we'll talk about a trade rumor, which has created quite a bit of conversation, even though I don't think it's going to happen. I'm pretty sure it's not going to happen unless the parameters of that change, but we're going to get to that, and we'll also kind of give you a picture of the Eastern Conference, which is going to be a free-for-all when we get right down to it. All right, let's start. I said it on Friday. We didn't get a chance to do a podcast because I didn't get a chance to watch the Vegas game on Friday night. I have since seen it. So, but I said this on the radio on Friday. Because I think that when you go back and you look at the Hurricanes and what they have been for the better part, I mean, basically the entire season. So we start the season home against Tampa, lose the game. Freddie plays really, really well. Didn't like the second goal he gave up, but, I mean, he played great. And the Hurricanes lose to 2 power play goals from the Lightning. They lose 2-1. So they alternate. Anderson and Kochetkov alternate the first 7 games. And then Freddie comes up lame. And essentially, at the initial, you remember the initial diagnosis was that it would be weeks. And then weeks became months. 3 of them, basically. And over that 3-month period, the Hurricanes were left with an inconsistent Pyotr Kochetkov and 2 minor league goaltending options. First, Spencer Martin, and then Dustin Tokarski. So I said at the time, if you fancy yourself a legitimate playoff team, and even though the Hurricanes weren't at the lofty heights of last year in terms of being a Stanley Cup contender. And I don't believe this team is necessarily a Stanley Cup contender, but anybody could get hot in the playoffs and make a run. And the Hurricanes are as good as anybody when it comes to doing that. But I said it at the time, if you fancy yourself a playoff contender, then the goaltending can't stay as it is. The Hurricanes needed to go get an NHL goalie. Well, apparently they didn't, but it was a roll of the dice that they would be able to maintain their position on the standings. Now, the Rangers certainly helped out by stinking, but it ain't like the Devils ran away. Capitals have been good, and the Capitals have a pretty good lead in the division, and they're winning tonight. Well, hopefully that game will have, that game actually might go final before we're done tonight. Actually might be final in the next couple of minutes as we're doing this live. I do think it did go final. Yeah, Capitals beat the Oilers 3-2. Washington is now 22 points over NHL 500. 22. That's impressive stuff. So the Hurricanes were fortunate that there wasn't more like whether the Rangers or the Devils didn't put a lot of distance between them and the Canes. But here's the thing. First of all, for the first 20 games of the season, Martin Necas was scoring at a clip which made all of Carolina's deficiencies not vanish, but seem like less of a problem. You know, through 20 games, Carolina's averaging 4 goals a game. You're outscoring a whole bunch of your issues. But once the offense dried up, and that's really because Necas is not the scorer right now that he was then, everything else is about the same, to be honest. So once the offense dried up, it was suddenly we all realized, like, wait, the goaltending's no good. And it wasn't. Not good enough. But through all of those periods, right, throughout the entire thing, the Hurricanes were basically just maintaining a 500 run because they got at one point to 11 over 500. And tonight, with their third straight win, they're now 13 over NHL 500. So through all of that poor hockey, not being able to win as many as 3 in a row, tonight, they won their third straight for the first time in 2 months. The 20th of November was the last time they had won 3 in a row. It's hard to do. It's hard to be a great team. I don't know if Carolina is a great team, but it's hard to be a legitimate Eastern Conference contender when you can't string 4, 5, 6 wins together. Canes won, 8 in a row at the beginning of the year. And they're I think they might have won 4 straight at one point. But 2 months when you haven't won more than 3 straight. Of course, they haven't really lost a bunch of games in a row either. So they've managed to mitigate their issues, goaltending, goal scoring, while winning enough games, and really leaving points out there that they could have gotten a few points on. The game at Tampa, if you think about that game, where, man, you're so close. You're a minute away from at least dragging it into overtime, and maybe you get a point. Maybe Sebastian Aho scores an overtime goal. He's been known to do that. But that isn't what happened, right? To get nothing out of that game. If you get 1 point, it just looks a little bit different. Maybe you get 2. Anyway, so with all of their bad play, they were managing to basically keep their head above water. And at some point, their game is going to get better. Aho, Svechnikov, Necas will start scoring goals again. Although they could just rely on Jesperi, Kotkaniemi. But meanwhile, this is a long way to get back to the initial point, right? Frederik Andersen comes back on Friday, and this is what I said Friday. Suddenly, Carolina's biggest weakness, and there's not even a debate over what their biggest weakness was for 3 months. It was goaltending. Among the contending teams in the East, if not the entire NHL, there isn't even a question who had the worst goaltending. Carolina. I brought you numbers on Kochetkov, right? 5-on-5, just straight 5-on-5. Goal saved above average. He was 48th in the league among goalies who had started a dozen games. I mean, that's not good. You can't be what amounts to like one of the worst starting goaltenders in the league just at even strength. But within those numbers were really good signs. Penalty kill. What was he on the penalty kill? I'm trying to I think penalty kill, he was top 10. High danger chances, top 3. So you could see what the level he's capable of is, but his problem is he lets in too many bad goals. Like, how the heck? Those kind of things. And those get you beat. And when you're not scoring goals, those will almost always get you beat. And that's what was happening. You go back to the Anaheim game. 2 goals that Anaheim scored, second goal and the last goal, the overtime winner, those can't go. We've talked about this. But I said this on Friday. When Andersen comes back, now that he was active, even though he wasn't going to play Friday against the Golden Knights, it was going to be Kochetkov. Here's what will happen. Kochetkov gets better. Andersen is the steadier of the 2 goalies. If you were looking at a line where you're talking about the bottom line would be his normal baseline, and the top line would be his high-end line, Andersen's bottom line, a little bit higher than Kochetkov's bottom line. Andersen's top line, maybe not quite as high as Kochetkov's top line. More of a range with Kochetkov, a little bit steadier with Andersen, but both have a high ceiling. We saw Andersen at the beginning of this year. You saw Andersen at the end of last year in the regular season, and he was excellent against the Islanders. Not excellent, really, against the Rangers. But Andersen coming back made Carolina's 1A, because it's going to be a tandem the rest of the regular season. It made their 1A better, and it gave them, arguably, the best 1B in the NHL. No-brainer for me. Goaltending just became a strength, not a weakness. Just with Andersen coming back. Now, had Andersen not come back at the early part of this range, if Carolina was waiting until after the Four Nations tournament, which wouldn't have had Andersen return until basically March, that wouldn't have been good. That's another, 2 more weeks of hockey before they break for this tournament? Almost, right? That wouldn't have been good at all. But Andersen's back. Kochetkov's played 2 outstanding games in a row. Andersen in the middle, excellent in Chicago. Suddenly, the weakness is a strength. So, congratulations to Pyotr Kochetkov. Another good performance tonight. He made the one mistake on the Dallas goal. He had help from his friends in allowing the goal. But ultimately, if Kochetkov does his job, everybody else can leave. If Kochetkov does his job, he just melts the puck down. He got himself out of position. He was outside the crease. And when trying to think who threw it off the back of basically tried to throw it off his back, ultimately that didn't happen. But Thomas Harley is in the crease. He wins the battle with Brent Burns, top of the crease, and he knocks it in. But that's really Kochetkov's mistake. Now, Burns could have erased the mistake for him by being better on that play. So, you got to be there. It's second game in a row where Brent Burns just the game in Chicago. He was snoozing on the goal that made it 3-2 right before the end of the second period. And tonight just lost the battle. But Brent Burns made some really good plays tonight. So I'm going to cut him some slack, even though that will make some of you angry. But that definitely a mistake that Brent Burns made. He also made another mistake later that I'll get to. But it's really Kochetkov's fault because that he shouldn't have been. There was no reason for him to be outside the crease. So the only time tonight where I thought Kochetkov got a little antsy. So that's the one element of his game, even when he's playing well, that we got to erase. It's what happened in Tampa, where they gave up the goal with a minute to go. He played a great game and allowed that late goal. But on this particular night, Carolina needed just 24 seconds to make us forget that Kochetkov and Burns combined to allow Dallas to tie the game. Sean Walker, who was actually in the penalty box on the sequence that allowed Dallas to get going and ultimately get the goal after the whistle, after the penalty expired. Sean Walker on the ice, next shift, bump-up shift with Kotkaniemi, with Necas, with Robinson. Walker comes down the right side, just makes a beeline for the net. Don't have any idea why Dallas allowed it, but he goes right to the front of the net, puts a shot on. Jake Ottinger makes the save, but it caroms off the skate of Kotkaniemi and in, his second goal of the game. But I thought Walker was excellent tonight. He had six shots on goal, 3 hits, I think, tonight. I think it's the best stretch of hockey that Sean Walker has played all year. I don't even think there's a second place to the way he has played of late. And I think there was a bounce back for Carolina's blue line for the most part. It wasn't perfect. You saw that Dallas had a number of really good scoring chances, and most of those were not given, but kind of defensive lapses. But I thought Jalen Chatfield gave the puck away a couple of times. He gave the puck away early in the second period. That led to chances. Middle of the period, again, a turnover led to Kochetkov needing to rob Robertson again. Jason Robertson, who got robbed a few times tonight, and he's been on a goal-scoring heater, so those aren't easy to do. Orlov had a couple of mistakes tonight, but for the most part, I thought those guys played well. I thought this was the best game that Slavin and Burns had played together in a bit, even though and they both were not good against Chicago at all. Slavin wasn't good. He got beat by basically the same way for 2 of Chicago's 3 goals, even though Burns could have been better on the back end. Slavin allows the initial pass in. I thought Slavin was excellent tonight. Burns makes the diving play late to deny a scoring opportunity, which was great. And he made another play a little bit later in the sequence. But, of course, he gave the puck away almost immediately after making the great defensive play. So, kind of a mixed bag on the play. But the Hurricanes' penalty kill was excellent, and Burns is a huge part of that. He and Slavin, that's the first pair. Burns has been very good, a very good part of Carolina's penalty kill. You don't have Skjei and Pesce anymore. So you're not sending out Slavin and Pesce or Slavin and Skjei. It's Slavin and Burns, and the Hurricanes have the second best penalty kill in the sport, and Burns a huge, huge part of that. But it's all right. Everybody, I talked to Trip Tracy before the game, and Trip is like, I don't get it. Burns has been good. Now, the last 15 or so games, I think his game has fallen off. I don't think there's any question about that. But for the first 30 games of the year, I thought Brent was great. So I got no problem with the way Brent Burns is playing. And what will likely annoy most of you is when the Hurricanes sign him to a 1-year contract when the season's over. I just get a feeling. I have no idea if it's going to happen, but I think it will. I think it will, and that'll make everybody mad. But I loved Carolina's blue line tonight. Certainly a far cry better than it was in Chicago last night, and way better than it was in Buffalo last Wednesday. Think about this. I know they were good against Vegas, but think about the game in Buffalo on Wednesday, when for the first time all year, other than Slavin and Burns, Rod flipped. He flipped the blue line pairs around. It was like, man, we were bad. It was a bad blue line game. All right, so those are the first two issues. Goaltending, blue line. Third tonight. This is where I said this in the first intermission, or second intermission. I believe hockey should have official scorers like baseball. Because if I were the official scorer of this game, Eric Robinson would have gotten an assist on the first goal. Because he makes the play. His defensive play forces the turnover. He doesn't touch the puck, but he forces the giveaway. Necas gets it. Quick pass, great vision. Across to Kotkaniemi, who under duress gets a good shot away quickly. There's traffic in front. Viola. Hurricanes lead 1-0 with less than 3 minutes left in the second period. So Eric Robinson has played dynamite hockey. I mean, really all year, but I think he has been really noticeable. For me, one of the, I didn't give him one of the 3 stars. He got my player of the game. Third star was Walker. Second star was Kotkaniemi. We'll talk about him in a second. First star was Kochetkov, and I gave Robinson, because we have to do a player of the game as well. I gave him player of the game. But because he creates the play that leads to the first goal. Kotkaniemi, second game in a row, is getting his propers, getting his flowers from the head coach. I know there's a KK Hive out there. You don't know what to do with your hands because you don't see Rod do that too often with Jesperi. But he's earned it. He deserves it. It's 2 games in a row where, maybe it started middle of last game, but 2 games in a row where he's playing a heavy game. He scored the goal. Remember in the second period? The second goal, it was Eric Robinson making the play, but where was Kotkaniemi? First of all, he helps Robinson behind the net. It wasn't a one-man job behind the net. Robinson got the puck, but Kotkaniemi was also there being physical. And then who gets to the front of the net? Jesperi Kotkaniemi. How about that? 2 games in a row. He gets to the front. Good things happen. And Rod said it after the game. Big body. Use it. Carolina needs somebody in the middle to use their body that isn't named Jordan Staal. Sebastian Aho is more of a finesse player, and frankly, at this point right now, offensively has just been okay. You're going to have to find gritty goals, and that is the definition of a gritty goal. You get to the front, you use your skate, and you score. 24 seconds after Thomas Harley made it 1-1. So good for KK. Necas with 2 assists tonight. You can see the rest of his game starting to come back. There weren't puck management issues tonight, but he was good with the puck. So a lot of encouraging signs, I thought, from that line. All right. Let me do the standings real quick, and then we'll spend our last 5 minutes on the news and rumor mill of the day. So for all of their problems, the Canes plus 13 to NHL 500, essentially 4 games ahead of the Devils. Carolina still has a game in hand, I believe, on New Jersey. 6 points behind Washington, but Washington's got games in hand on Carolina. So Capitals what an incredible season they're having. Still plenty of time left. Carolina could catch him, but I'm not really concerned about it. And you shouldn't either be. You want home ice advantage in the first round. And if the Hurricanes can get home ice advantage, that doesn't guarantee you anything. The Hurricanes could lose to, let's just say, the Devils. But I like their chances with home ice advantage against New Jersey. Second round, look, I don't think anybody would be surprised if anybody beat anybody. Like the only team in the East that I will be surprised if they don't win their first round series is Florida. Although, right now, lining up to play Tampa. And if it's Florida-Tampa, well, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't foresee it happening. I think Florida's the best team still. Anyway, I like Carolina's chances in the first round if they can get home ice advantage. And the Devils have a great team. I love that roster. So I don't know what the issue is. They haven't been good, especially lately. And by the way, Devils home to Boston on Wednesday. It's a big game. And let me explain this to you before we get to my final point. Ottawa right now, Ottawa and Montreal are each on 52 points, 5 games over NHL 500. Boston has 52 points, 4 over. Columbus has 51, 4 over. The Rangers have 50, 3 over. Right now, from Ottawa through Detroit on 47 points, you've got 8 teams separated by 5 total points. That's going to be a fun race to watch. Hopefully Carolina's not part of it. It would take a pretty significant losing streak for the Hurricanes to get back to that group. But that's going to be fun to watch. And the Rangers look like they've woken up. I don't know if they've truly woken up. And maybe the Rangers are the team that adds JT Miller. All right. So we'll just do this. I know Elliot Friedman and others have said that the Hurricanes are definitely involved in JT Miller. Here's the way I would see that. I think, the Hurricanes have probably had conversations with Vancouver. I don't think the conversations with Vancouver are serious. I don't. And the reason for that is because while a player like JT Miller, I think, is very important for Carolina to acquire, not just for this year, but for the next several years. That player is important for Carolina to get. It doesn't mean it has to be JT Miller. And regardless of, it could be a Nazem Kadri as opposed to a JT Miller. Here's the problem. There are 3 things that go into acquiring a player like JT Miller. The first is the player, the person. It's the number one factor for Rod Brind'Amour. Just is. The number one factor is what kind of person are we bringing? And I'm not saying that JT Miller is a bad person. I don't know him. I know what the reputation is, but I don't really care about the reputation. Here's what I do know. In Vancouver, there are 3 elements, or 2 real elements, that lead me to believe that JT Miller is a problem there. The first is, he seems to me to be the perfect player for Rick Tocchet, right? Tocchet was a hard-nosed, ornery player. Well, that's JT Miller, who happens to be an elite scorer, too, and a center who can play both ends of the ice, kill penalties, be on the power play. JT, physical. I mean, there's nothing not good about JT Miller's body of work. But you would think that of all the players on that roster, he would be best suited to play for Rick Tocchet. But we know that there are problems in that dressing room with Miller and Elias Pettersson, the star center, and also Quinn Hughes. Unless Hughes' problems are with Pettersson, which maybe, but that's not what I think. Either way, Vancouver doesn't really want to move either. but they believe they're going to have to move one. And the salary for Pettersson and the fact that he hasn't really been producing make moving that salary way more difficult. So they're going to move JT Miller. But the problem is, this is the second part of this equation, the acquisition cost for any team is going to be steep. For the Hurricanes, the money's got to work out. They have to send as much money to Vancouver because Vancouver's not going to pay the freight, part of the freight for this year and 5 more years. Get to that in a minute. And while Carolina would absolutely like to have a player like JT Miller, the cost of acquiring him, the 2 players that would have to go, and the rumor would be Kotkaniemi and Roslovic, they would have to add, because honestly, you'd make that trade in 1 billion years, like 1 billion times in a row. Not that you're trying to dump Kotkaniemi. He's playing well, so whatever. But Vancouver ain't doing it for that. Let's remember that the other team in this equation, they're not dumb. You're not giving up a player of Miller's ilk and only getting Jesperi, Kotkaniemi, and Jack Roslovic back. That's insanity. So the Hurricanes would have to give up 2 players, whatever the players are, right? 2 players. It would cost them a prospect. It would cost them at least 1 high draft pick, more than likely a first rounder. It might cost them 2 first rounders if it didn't cost a prospect. And if it cost you a prospect, if you're Vancouver, like maybe you're asking for Nikishin, but you're asking for probably 1 or 2 of Carolina's best prospects. And what we know about this organization is that A, they value draft picks. B, they value prospects. And C, and this is the third part of the equation, they don't really want to sign players to long-term deals who are already in their 30s. And JT Miller will turn 32 in 2 months, less than 2 months. He's got 5 more years left in a contract that's paying him more than $8 million a year annually. That's the cap hit. And this year, for various reasons, interpersonal communications within the dressing room, he's had some off-the-ice issues. He basically took a leave from the team for a while. He hasn't had the greatest year. Anyway, I am not here to tell you that JT Miller wouldn't be great in a Hurricanes uniform. I am here to tell you that I get the reports. I think that's more coming from the Vancouver side, using Carolina like they did last year with Elias Pettersson. Did Carolina have discussions with Vancouver for Elias Pettersson? Sure, but that was never going to happen unless Sebastian Aho was going the other way. So, look, again, is there truth to the rumor that there have been discussions between the Hurricanes and the Canucks for JT Miller? I'm sure. But my understanding is nothing serious at all. And if Carolina does end up acquiring JT Miller or a player like him, the acquisition cost won't be what it would be for JT Miller. That's the best I can do for you. I think I pretty much covered it. But I'm all about acquiring that type of player, even Miller, if Carolina isn't going to have to give up that much. With that said, Aluminum Company of North Carolina, which is still in Durham. Everything for the exterior of your home, you can find it there. Hey, that's a great win. Did we even talk about the win? I think we did. 2-1 over the Dallas Stars to sweep the season series from Dallas. That's pretty heady stuff. Dallas is a big team. Great goaltending. Way to go, Carolina. We'll see if the Hurricanes can knock the Columbus Blue Jackets down a peg when the Hurricanes host the Jackets on Thursday. We'll be at the arena, weather permitting. It's a winter wonderland out there. Thank you very much for joining us here on the Canes Corner podcast. Real quick, because we have a lot of comments here. Christopher thinks I nailed it. I thank you very much for saying that, Christopher. So do I. Man, it's just so much better when we all get along, isn't it? Hope everybody has a good night. Stay safe. Make a snow angel. Make a snowman. Have a snowball fight with your kids. And we'll see everybody after the Canes and the Blue Jackets Thursday night at Lenovo Center in Raleigh, weather permitting.